Good afternoon and a warm welcome here at the Landesgalerie. My name is Sebastian Schäffer. I'm the director of the Institute for the Danube Region in Central Europe, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this Danube Salon in the framework of the Europa-Forum Wachau. I would like to thank especially here Theresa Edstadler for the good and long-standing cooperation. We also do this together with the AG Donauländer, and here Simon Ortner and Theresa Stummer have been very important in putting this Danube Salon together. I also would like to thank the University for Continuing Education, which is another partner of ours, and I would also like to say thank you to the rector of the University for Continuing Education, who is also the chairman of the Institute for the Danube Region in Central Europe. Last but not least, I would like to thank the IDM team for the preparation of this Danube Salon, and here especially Sophia Beiter for the input. This year's title is Facing Polarization, Embracing Dialogue, and I think it's not only a timely topic, but it is a very incremental and important topic for the future of Europe. Speaking of Europe, you find on your seat bags from Europe Direct with information on the remembrance year, remembrance for the future. We are remembering important years with the number 5. So, of course, 1945, but also 1955, 1995, and 2025. I'll leave it to you to find out why these dates are mentioned, and maybe we will also come back to those years in our discussion. As I said, it's a great pleasure and honor to again be moderating this discussion, which focuses on a topic that feels more relevant than ever: the role of remembrance culture in times of societal change. In a world increasingly marked by polarization and fragmentation, we want to explore how historical experiences can help us build bridges rather than deepen divides. How can we use memory and commemoration not just to reflect on the past, but to strengthen societal cohesion and democratic values today? This panel brings together voices from culture, academia, and politics to look at these questions from different angles. And together we'll discuss how dialogue across societal groups can be fostered and how a shared understanding of the past can support a more constructive and united future. And since at all of these occasions time is always very limited, we are diving right into the discussion, and I would like to ask to join me here our first speaker, Petra Korlaar, Deputy Mayor of the town of Mikulov. A warm welcome applause. Deputy Mayor, she is, as I said, Deputy Mayor of the town Mikulov, a historic town in South Moravia. She's dedicated to promoting local development through cultural heritage, sustainable tourism, and cross-border cooperation. She's deeply involved in community engagement. She works in strengthening ties between citizens and local institutions while fostering partnerships with the Central European region. I'm very happy to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good evening everybody, and thank you very much. It is a true honor for me to be here today with you. Thank you.
My first question to you is, your city lies just a few kilometers away from the border with Austria. Since the fall of the Iron Curtain, both sides have been working on bridging this gap, and that was not only physical, but also in the minds of people. What experience have you had with this long polarized society, and how do you seek dialogue and cooperation to counter this polarization?
Thank you for the question, because it's been 3 years I am a deputy mayor. But before that, I was, of course, a citizen of Czech Republic, but I also I was born in 1982, so in Czechoslovakia, on the other side, of the Iron Curtain. And since the 90s, I was living in France, in Paris, and part of my education comes from French educational system. And my first professional years happened in London. So I also got a little bit to know the British look over Europe. And when I came back to Czech Republic, I really felt like a European citizen on the first place. And when we moved with my husband, who's from the Netherlands, to Mikulov 14 years ago, where our daughter was born, I just realized how deep the borders in Europe still are. It wasn't like that. I haven't felt that through my life. But when I settled in Mikulov, small town, 70 kilometers from Vienna, 50 from Brno, literally on the border, there I really realized that the border is there. Not visible physically, but really in the mind of the people for various reasons. And I started, my personal task was to actually try to connect somehow. I don't speak German. I speak very well French and English. Unfortunately, I do not speak German, so it was very hard for me to go across the border to Drassenhofen, Poisdorf, Ottental, and to speak to the people because they do not often speak English as well. So we started with different, basically just small projects. Some of them are like inviting the Austrian partners, mayors from the villages above for our ball. Every year on the castle of Mikulov we have a ball, and they come and they found it actually very nice that they can see the town in the winter, you know. It's all bit calm, and there we happen to have some dialogues. And what I realized is that after revolution, both sides were very keen to talk, to discover. That was the generation before me, those who were doing the revolution, and they were very proud of the wall to fall. But after 10, 20, 30 years, it became a little bit, let's say, we got used to the open borders, and the dialogue was not necessary, or actually thought is not necessary. Why should we try to create cooperation? Because we can, so we don't have to fight for it. Nevertheless, when you offer some kind of cooperation, you actually find out that there is a need on the other side, and they are like, wow, thank you for inviting us. That wasn't before. It used to be 30 years ago, but not today. So not only that we do social events together, but we are now also seeking for cooperation in concrete cultural projects. For example, now in Mikulov we have literature residencies. So basically every month there's one writer who comes to the town and writes a text. We have the project with Austrian Cultural Forum, with a German Association of Writers and a Czech Literature Center. So we have Czech and Austrian and German writers switching every month, it's one of them, and they are writing. And they are also leaving little notes to each other, and they are connecting between themselves, trying to say, okay, I'm publishing with that one, how did you do that translation, and so on. And it straight away creates like a kind of a connection on itself just by allowing it, by actually asking, do you need a system where you can cooperate? And there's always the answer is yes. So now we are also doing a project with the village of the town of La, where we want to connect more with tourism, because it's not only culture, but it's also economy, local economy, and tourism is very important for Austria, but also for Czech Republic, especially for our town, which is a historical town, and we have, there's 7,500 citizens, and we have about 4,000 beds for tourists, so you can imagine it's a lot. So it is important to us, and we want to connect with Austria basically to promote the whole region and to make sure that people, when they come, they don't stay 1 night or 2 nights, but 3 or 4, because they can also go cross the border, which again was not happening so much before because of the not existing wall, but somehow in our heads it can still be. So the economical aspect is there too. And after 3 years of just trying to address these topics and to create some possibilities, I am myself amazed by how the answer is positive, and actually it turns there's a need to know that it is still important to fight for the dialogue.
Absolutely, absolutely. How can you apply for that writer's residency? That sounds very, very appealing, if I might ask another question.
You go through the associations.
Okay.
So through the Austrian Cultural Forum, or the German Association, or the Czech Literature Center.
Right.
So it's not us, it's not political, we don't choose it.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Well, I guess we have to add a couple of years to the whole picture when I mentioned the 5 years, the 5 years. It's of course for the region especially important, maybe 1989, but then also 1939 and then 2004. I guess this contributed to this development. How can actually smaller regions and minority communities contribute to a broader European dialogue? Because I mean, you have now the possibility to share your experience. How does that contribute to an exchange on memory, identity, and maybe even democratic cohesion, especially with a focus maybe on the Danube region?
Well, by creating forums like this, in the first place, by maybe inviting also the local people, as I see myself, thank you very much, because that doesn't happen that often, that small community leaders, let's say, have such a beautiful panel and audience and event that we are invited, and there is a lot of that we want to say, but at the communal level we do not have the medias for us, but we have a lot of experiences. And to come to your question, yes, remembrance and knowing the history, this is something that when I speak from my perspective, it's something that we have to work on. And you mentioned the year 39, but after the Second World War, as you all know, the communism started in Czech Republic, and what that created, not only that changed completely the life of the people, and for my town, it also changed completely the genome of the people, because more than 3,000 German-speaking inhabitants had to go, new came, and what the communism did also, it was a doctrine, an ideology, and it created its own history. It created its own view on what was happening on the second part of 20th century and even before. And it's not so easy to rewrite the historical books. And it takes time. So I would say probably over the last 10 years, Czech society as such and historians have been really trying to actually, put the things in the right context. And it's not so easy if you've grown up in it and you are taught this is the truth by school, by television. It's not so easy to wake up one day and say, actually, no, it was a little bit different. So it takes time, and the time actually means you have to go back to something that you don't know and be a little bit archaeological. So to try to really go back to the roots, to the racines of the events, and to analyze them objectively with all transparency and authority, of course, to be able to say this is what happened. And this was wrong, this was right, because if we do not understand our mistakes, well, we can never learn from it. Yeah. And then history repeats itself. So, this is a very important thing as a society we have to do. Czech Republic, in the specialty, I think we have a lot of depth to that. And it's actually exciting as well, because we discover history, we discover actually what happened, for example, in my town, because the first citizens who are living there today, who were born there, are those from the 70s. Because in the 50s, the town was repopulated by people who came from all Czechoslovakia and sometimes also other countries, and they had no idea how to do wine, because we are a wine region, a very proud wine region. They were not understanding how the family of the Tristein, who were the owners of the town, worked the business, because we are also on a historical business route, basically how the town was run. So they had to learn it with also lots of mistakes, but there was not a knowledge transfer. So today, for example, the museum which we have in our town is spending a lot of time as well to actually try to collect any historical objects or events from post-war era, and it's very hard, I have to say, surprisingly. It's not that long time ago, but it is not easy.
Thank you very much. I have maybe one concluding question. When it comes to the insights that you shared, I would also be interested. I mean, you were until 1993 a country together with Slovakia, and then the separation happened very peacefully. How maybe can you shed a light a little bit, not only how the relationship with Austria is, but also with Slovakia maybe?
Of course, this is a question I've been asked a lot, especially in the 90s when the separation happened, because somehow the West world was expecting a war, and they were thinking that maybe we were war refugees, and I'm coming actually from the Slovakian border, so I can say that there was no war. This is a question that actually is also very interesting from a historical point of view, because there is still many countries, also in Europe, that are actually living with several nations in one official country. So for Czechoslovakia, the case has been very special, and as I always say to the Belgium, you cannot do the same. Czechoslovakia has been put together as a federation after First World War to have a better chance for existence, and it was a partnership. There was nothing else. There was just a political need for us to come together, but the border was always very clear. Both countries always had very various economy, so the split up was also done in a very gentleman way. And although it has been very hard at that time, because it really felt that it was not done by a veto, it was done by a political decision. And we all, especially at the border, we felt that this is not about them to decide how we feel in the country. If we want to be named Czech Republic, Czechia, Czechoslovakia, this is about the people. They should decide. But I think history, 30 years back later, I think it has been probably a very pragmatic decision done quickly after revolution. And now I think both countries for quite a long time now are saying it was better. It has helped both countries to go their own way, to fasten the economy, to be proud of their history, of their cultural heritage, and so this would probably be the final word. It was a positive act.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to, especially in these times, to have a positive outlook at the end of such a discussion. Thank you very much. If I mention one more year, I think 1982. You said it's a beautiful year. Very, very wonderful people are born in this year. So congratulations, and thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And with this, I would like to welcome to the stage Lukas Mandl, member of the European Parliament.
Thank you, Sebastian Schäfer. Sorry for being late, and thanks for your understanding for that. I just flew in from Brussels for my obligations there, and I'm happy to be home even during difficult days. If I was briefed correctly, I meant to say a few remarks as introductory remarks first, and then we will have an interview. If that's still right, then I want to do it on behalf of our governor, Johanna Mikulov, who asked me also to represent her before I will go to the interview as a member of the European Parliament. And on the one side, it's beautiful that time and again, every year, we have the Europa-Forum Wachau, and can create in this beautiful surrounding, if I may say so, real European connections. And this year, looking to the program, it's even special because we have Central Europe represented excellently with Petra today and with others yesterday and tomorrow too. And also the Western Balkans, which means so much to Austria, but to Europe in its entirety. So every day in European Parliament, Austrians and others try to persuade for the Finns, for the Swedish, for the Dutch, that the Western Balkans matter to Europe in its entirety. And Ukraine, of course, these times, we have been attacked now for more than 3 years. We here only via hybrid means and measures, but Ukraine has been attacked militarily, as we all know. So there can't be a European endeavor today without including Ukraine, and this also happens during the Europa-Forum Wachau. And still it's overshadowed by the events of this week. The terrible attack in the city of Graz, the second largest city of Austria. And I have appreciated the government's decision to make Staatstrauer, as we call it in Austria. And I highly appreciate the clear decision that the Europa-Forum Wachau this year, different to other years, is not going along with parties and receptions and I would say the pleasure parts, because this would absolutely not be appropriate for the situation we have today. And at the same time, and I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to decide myself whether I want to come or not today. At the same time, I'm grateful that I was given the opportunity and I decided to come because first, in the end, this is part of our work. I mean, it's a work that fills us with sense, but it's still work. And if in times like these others would stop to work, like, I don't know, bus drivers or police officers, things would not work. So we are also asked, I would say, to continue work. And most importantly, I really think humans are creation and creatures of community. So we need each other in times like this, even in times of tragedy, even in times of fear, horror, as our federal president, Alexander van der Bellen, has said. So to come together in a decent manner is maybe the right thing to do, and this is why it's good that it takes place. It's good that the Europa-Forum Wachau takes place, and it's at the same time good and very understandable and highly appreciated that we decently decided not to have parties and receptions around. Having said that, I have the big honor and privilege to greet you on behalf of the Governor of Lower Austria, Johanna Mikulov, who will be here tomorrow, as I understood correctly, because officially this Staatstrauer will end tonight at 7 p.m. But what will still continue and even only begin is to research on the causes and the circumstances, as also our federal president has said, of this event. So let's face challenges and embrace visions, as the title of this Europa-Forum Wachau is called. I like the title very much because for a long time, maybe on European level, we haven't faced the true challenges as they were. We went different roads, which were maybe not the main and important roads, not the real priorities. And sometimes I still see the lack of visions on European level. We have a better commission than the last commission, but I think we still have to encourage the Commission to lead in a positive sense. Leadership means to serve and to lead in a more visionary way. Having said that, I think the subtitle of this event is Facing Polarization, Embracing Dialogue. And as I think dialogue is the best medicine against the poison of polarization, it's the right thing to do. Thanks for all of you for joining, even by the weather is beautiful outside. Sorry if I reveal a secret here, because I come from outside now, but it's still beautiful outside, and you remain here and you will remain. So it's good to practice dialogue in order to tackle polarization. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lukas. Thank you. Thank you for joining us and for coming back to the Danube Salon. It's your second time. I'm always grateful that you join us. It's always a bit difficult to stand next to you, not because you're also a great speaker, but you're also a very tall man.
I'm the smallest among my brothers.
Yeah. So I'm glad that your brothers aren't here then. But when you say you just came from Brussels, and in your work in the European Parliament, you engage especially also with democratic values and civic education. And if we look at the EU, how can they more effectively support resilience against polarization, and especially amongst younger generations in Central and Eastern Europe?
Thanks for the question. I'm not too surprised about the question, frankly, but I mean, it's good to elaborate on these issues very much because we all have a part in it. So it's not a theoretical thing that happens only in Brussels. We all have a part in it first. Second, polarization doesn't happen from scratch. It's triggered, especially from outside. That's the part of the hybrid warfare we have been talking about, having been attacked by Russia since February 22 and via hybrid means and measures already before. But as one of our special committees in European Parliament found out, only 60% of hybrid attacks like this come from Russia. Also other counterparts on our planet are involved into that. So polarization is triggered partly. Polarization is also triggered from inside. And this is part of the political landscape we have to face. When we talk about facing challenges, we have to face that it's not given that each and every political actor would be keen to constructively serve the common good. This would be the ideal scenario. Nothing is entirely ideal. Also, political landscape, also in democratic structures, would not be ideal, and democracies are fragile. So polarization is a way to damage democracy because polarization can weaken us. And other parts of the world seek for confrontation. Parts of the political spectrum within Europe seek for confrontation, while the majority, I think, of us still are keen to elaborate on cooperation. This is what we should thrive for, but we have to defend ourselves against confrontation, and here are many means and measures possible. We have now the third special committee in the European Parliament working on that. It's called European Union Democracy Shield Special Committee. I have the privilege to the third time negotiate in this committee too, and education is one of the first and big steps. If one can, due to common sense and good education, decide whether a given information would be plausible or not, this is already a big part of the solution. Education remains a big part of the solution. Second, human encounter. So we don't only have anymore the disinformation and fake news and hate speech online, by the way, not only in social media channels, also in messenger services, even more dangerous because it's not to be seen publicly. If you're not in a channel, you don't see it, but you get triggered a lot, and I speak to a lot of people, not only here, also in daily life in our wonderful country, and I can, even after a few words of exchange, I can understand, maybe your information comes from Telegram and not from ORF or from any other trustworthy news source. Third point, beside education and fighting these kind of disinformation, misinformation, and so on, it's human encounter. To personally talk, as we do it today. This is maybe one more reason why it's good that we meet. We don't do it online, we don't do it via Zoom, we don't do it whatever in chat channels, or we do it from face to face, from person to person. And this becomes more important, especially not only in times of this disinformation, but also in times of artificial intelligence. And I'm not against it. It's useful, it's necessary, it's important, it's for innovation, for growth, for competitiveness, rightly used. But it also comes along with a lot of threats. And this is why it will be so important that we continue and even strengthen our opportunities and dimensions of human encounter. And then there are, but I don't want to annoy you with that, then there are many, many fields the European Union Democracy Shield Special Committee works on in terms of concrete means and measures in all these fields, and the work has just started. So as the last mandate, we had some very valuable outcomes. I think this time we will again have that. We have seen in Romanian election that was just stolen, and this is not a populistic expression here, it just proved that it was stolen. That's why it was repeated, because let's say a cheated election is not a democratic election. In Poland we have an outcome many Europeans don't like that much, but we don't have any indication of fraud, and this is also to be accepted from a Democrat. But elections have to remain democratic and not be influenced via undemocratic means and measures, and we will face these challenges even more in the future than so far yet.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that also connects to a second question that I would have. We have as a topic also remembrance. Now, the European Union has the wonderful motto, united in diversity, but I could imagine that this makes it very difficult to have a European remembrance, because it's most of the time very done in an angle from the nation state. Is the European Union, and here especially also the work in the European Parliament and then your work, something that can contribute to, say, bridge that gap?
I think yes, and I even more think so since I have been involved, especially in the Western Balkans, but also in other areas, things we have all been involved more or less in since the beginning of Putin-Russia's war. It's not irrelevant what happened in the past. It's just relevant. It's relevant for people. It's relevant for people's emotions, sentiments. It's relevant for people's understanding of today's ideas, of future perspectives, of politics. So we have to deal with it, and nobody's excluded. I mean, I'm not talking about only for others it matters. It matters for all of us, what happened in the past. Maybe we don't care that much about what happened far away, where Austrian, in my case, for example, was involved, but generally it matters to all of us. And that's why I strongly supported in the beginning of this mandate in European Parliament the establishment of a special parliamentary group in the European Parliament on remembrance. It's called Remembrance Group. It was initiated by my Lithuanian colleague, Rasa Jukenevičienė. She has a lot of experience. She's a really experienced lady, also from Soviet times, and is a Lithuanian politician, is part of the Lithuanian freedom movement already in the 90s and before, and today a member of European Parliament. And she established this group, and we are working especially on these fields of understanding, remembrance, academically looking to history. This is something that had been missed in the Western Balkans after the wars, unfortunately. This is something that leads today to problems in the Western Balkans. I will not address too much today, but you can ask me during small talk or whatever, but we all face it. And this is something that must not be missed in Ukraine. That's why in European Parliament we amended, and it was also positively decided with majority, that the Ukraine facility, that's a different thing than the peace facility. Peace facility is used for military defense, and the Ukraine facility is for reconstruction. And we amended, and it was positively decided that the Ukraine facility will also be used for overcoming war traumata and treatment of psychological issues which doubtlessly appear after such a war, and after years of war, and after population movements and so on, in order to facilitate a better future. And this is all part of remembrance culture, and this is something we need, and this is why I can say, positively surprised that even this important topic, but which is not a daily political topic, has been put on the agenda of Europa-Forum Wachau. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Lukas. It's always a pleasure to have you. I hope you will return in the future. Maybe next time we can sit next to each other, because while I professionally look up to you very much, physically it's a little bit straining for my neck. Yeah? Thank you very much, Lukas. And before I ask my next panelists to the stage, I ask you for a favor, because at the IDM we are conducting currently a study on how the future of European integration can become more citizens-based and inclusive. My colleague Sophia Beiter, who is a Charlemagne Prize fellow this year, is doing that research, and she would greatly appreciate if you could scan this QR code and fill out this survey. Thank you very much. And while you fill out the survey, I ask to come to the stage my next panel. In alphabetical order, Stefan Benedik, Malvina Talik, and Svitlana Teluka. Please. feel free to choose where you feel comfortable. It's probably not the smartest move to ask people taking out their phones while I ask you to the stage and then ask them to clap their hands, but you managed very well. Thank you very much for joining us today. Some housekeeping rules. I will briefly introduce you, then I have a couple of questions. We'll look at the time, but we will also give the possibility to ask questions from the audience, so already prepare your question if you have some. And then we have a concluding question, and all of this within a very short time frame, but I'm sure we're going to manage. So I already asked you to be as concise and comprehensive as possible, but then also later, if you ask a question, be very short about that. So I have, again, in alphabetical order, right in the middle, Stefan Benedik. He's the head of the Department of Public History at the House of Austrian History, historian and museum curator, specialized in public history, memory culture, and digital storytelling. He leads the initiative that brings Austrian complex history closer to the public through innovative and inclusive formats. Stefan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Now you're done with the survey, hopefully, so we clap again. Thank you. Closest to me is my colleague, also professionally, of course, Malvina Talik, research associate at the Institute for the Danube Region in Central Europe. She's a political scientist and focuses on memory politics and identity in Central and Eastern Europe. And at IDM, she also works on fostering intercultural and interregional cooperation within the Danube area. Malvina, thank you for joining us. And then we have with us Svitlana Teluka, historian specialized in oral history from Ukraine. Thank you that you are joining us. She's a historian affiliated with the Leibniz Institute for the History and Culture of Eastern Europe, and her research centers on oral history, methodologies, memory of conflict, and the preservation of personal narratives from war-affected regions. Thank you for joining us. So let's dive right into it. One opening question for all of you, rapid reaction round. What does facing polarization and embracing dialogue mean to you in your personal and professional work, especially in relation to memory and history? Stefan.
Well, to be quite brief on it, I think the most important thing is, especially when coming from an institution, to continuously, practice self-criticism in a constructive way. Because in order to establish dialogue, and the meaningful dialogue, you have to always question the position from which you approach others. So I think that's to me one of the most important things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Malvina?
Let me be maybe a bit less brief. So professionally, as a political scientist, this means to me to understand the root causes for polarization, also identify in what way it can be averted or stopped and overcome. And in Central and Eastern Europe, the region that I work on, history is very central to most people, and it also causes a lot of emotions. And on a personal level, as was already mentioned today by Lukas Mandl, it is about dialogue. And to me, this means talking to people who have opposing views. And to give you an example that happened to me years ago is when I was traveling to Poland on a BlaBlaCar. I couldn't choose the passengers. And it happened that one of the passengers, within 10 minutes before we even left Vienna, said so many things which are highly offensive and dehumanizing towards a certain group that I reacted. When I reacted, this unleashed a very, very heated debate. And the way to Poland lasts 4 hours. And if you are on a car, you can't just leave. So we discussed and debated it really heavily. He was a good contender for sure. But I was very relieved when I was getting off. But what surprised me is that he also got off the car, came to me, shook my hand, and said, "Thank you." I asked, "What for?" And he said, "For discussing, for talking." Because very many times we just don't talk to each other anymore, and I disagree with you. And I know you disagree with me, but I also learned something. And this is really stuck with me for all these years. And I think, yes, to overcome polarization, we need to talk even if we disagree, because it's not about getting into separate camps, but to still be able to have a dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's, of course, other car-sharing possibilities that you can use when you travel. Yeah, we're not invested in this. Svetlana, your answer to that question.
Hello, do you hear me? Danke für Einladung. Ich freue mich, hier zu sein. Ich habe learned this phrase for 3 years. Sorry. Ich muss Deutsch lernen. Really, thank you for invitation. It's an honor for me to be here. And all this day, I heard too many things about Ukraine, and I appreciate it actually about this. And as for direct question, for me it's very close actually, because my voice for dialogue. I'm working with oral history, and we have very dramatic and traumatic history in Ukraine, and we have somehow experience battle for history. So for me, history it's not a dogma. It's discover it's a long process, and without find this platform in different way, in different aspects, because I'm like a teacher, because I'm associate professor still in Kharkiv Polytechnical University, and it's and my voice is always about yours about students. So we need to ask which voices are absent today, or to criticize our past, or to find some different forms for this create this dialogue. And the history, it's not a space and a field for battle. It's for really dialogue and to find some unite points.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would ask actually my first question in the second round also to you. Would like to continue with you, Sveta. In your oral history work during wartime, and I think you also brought us some beautiful examples, how do you see personal narratives contributing to social resilience and also unity?
Thank you for these questions. Yes, for me, oral history, it's not only like methods, historical methods, it's a part of my life, and I really involved with this, and it was before the full-scale invasion, because we recorded so many interviews, survival in the Second World War, Holocaust, Chernobyl disaster, so it's my tips, life tips. And after the full-scale invasion, actually, I'm on my place, I should to do something. That is what I should do in this total stress condition. I took my camera and went to my audience. My audience was very different, and we recorded everything that we could. So we created this multi-perspective approach for our war, and maybe I hope you know that today Ukraine is one of the documented war in the world. So we try to create this space and to learn as more as possible that we can do in our condition. And it's very complicated actually, but and to work with this, and because for today it's like oral history is like a mess. There are so many sources, and we have too many questions, because everything that we know about oral history, it was the keywords past. We know what does it mean past and how we deal with past. But what about current situation? We are documenting now. We have various huge debates inside of our community in oral history. And now, what does it mean? Definition: is it oral history or it's only documenting? Because it's too fresh and it's like a fast react for all our events. And we have some doubts. So many institutions, some private initiative record everything, but they don't have some doubts what will the next step. Should be published. Should be open this database. It's about huge collection, or we should to waiting maybe for 50 years, as in my students' years, it was 50 years when the past. It's real history when we are involved with this, so we should waiting for this time. My approach, it's not waiting, because the rocket is flying, because the drone is flying, so I should to react. And my approach is to dive in personal story, in biographical interview, and through this personal narrative, create our history timeline. And I have a few copies. If you want, you can take it. It's my approach, and I unite graphic narratives. It's a source in normal source, oral history, and graphic. We united these two approaches and to create something maybe new, not new, because you know about mouse, you heard about other different brilliant story, but it's our approach. And because through this personal narrative, we can construct all our history. For example, survival in the Second World War, Ostarbeiter Anton Rudnev, he survived in German. He continued to live with some discrimination in Ukraine after the war finished. And today he survived from the new reality, and we recorded this second interview, and he actually don't recognize what does it mean Russian like an enemy, because we were in the Dachau, we were in Ngame, and we smoke and burn cigarette together, and how we deal with it. So the narrative for me, it's more visible and more perspective diving in history. So my choice is, and my voice for personal story and personal narratives. Sorry for the
Thank you very much. I think that perfectly leads to the question that I have for Stefan, because these contested memories at the house of Austrian history, this is of course also something that you have to deal with, I imagine. And how can you work with these differing narratives to foster inclusive dialogue?
Well, this is of course an invitation to bore you all with institutional history, which I won't do, but just for the international audience, to give you a very, very short overview. Austria did not have a National Museum of History until 2018. So it was one of the last countries in Europe that actually established a museum of history on the federal level. And one of the reasons, I think, arguably, is that the big two political parties that shaped Austria's post-war history did not agree on how to approach history, especially not so much the history of the National Socialism, which was already agreed upon, but it was the history of the Austrian dictatorship before. And one might actually argue that there were good reasons to mistrust each other on that subject. And so it took very, very long, precisely because of contested memories. But, I mean, this sounds like a disadvantage, but it's also an advantage from the perspective of the museum, because if we would have been established, for instance, in the period in which those institutions were established, in Germany, for instance, it would have been something completely different, because in the late 80s, those museums were meant as, they were often called, fabrics of identity, like real companies that create identities, nationalist, often in different ways, but still nationalist identities. Whereas now, we were opening in 2018, and then it was already clear a museum is a place for reflection, and it is a place that precisely tries to provoke people to think beyond what they perceive as history. And in that sense, our law, like the federal law that established our museum, is actually quite interesting because it calls this museum a forum for discussion. And I think this tackles what you were asking, because when a museum is simply a forum for discussion, I mean, everything is possible, more or less, but it combines it with a precondition, and the precondition is based on academic knowledge. And I think those two aspects are actually quite interesting. And we tried to translate that in an easy to understand slogan, and that is those two main questions that the museum tackles are: what happened and what does it mean for today? And those are two separate questions because there is no open debate on what happened. I mean, we need to approach the past from different perspectives. We need to have more audiences included in these debates. We have to have more voices heard. But it's not an open debate. Whereas on the question, what does it mean for today, you can have an open debate. And last sentence on that. It is now almost 10 years later. I think the situation has changed completely because now it's not so much anymore about contested memories, but now it's really about challenging the very fabric of knowledge-based society. And those are two different challenges because the challenge in terms of contested memories, it was productive because it is about a debate, it is about, it's about dialogue in the end. You disagree, but you have a debate, maybe even an argument in a car, and in the end, you thank each other. But when you have, and this is, I think, the discourse in the moment that is led by a very small but extremely powerful force that is actually questioning the very fabric of a knowledge-based society. And then it's not about contestation, but it really is about dismantling discourse. It is about delegitimizing critical thinking, and then you can't, it's really questioning debate as such, and it's about disrupting democracy. And then institutions and states need to approach differently, I think.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we continue here with Malvina, and especially the question how the historical narratives can remain independent from political influence, and how are collective memories also shaped for political purposes?
I think many of us know the famous quote by George Orwell that who controls the past controls the future. So it is a grain of truth, because the way we understand history, the history we learn through textbooks, from museums, even from movies, historical movies, very much affects our identity, our shared identity. And we should also keep in mind that history is never totally neutral. I don't know if I don't get into troubles here, but historical narratives are as such selective. And there is a very, very pragmatic reason for that. We just can't represent always all the voices. Even if there is an exhibition, there is only a selection of the most representative ones, and the rest is very often left out. And of course, this selection leaves room for, or temptation for, certain manipulations or using history for the service of politics. It does not have to be the case, though. We should also keep in mind that this selections does not happen in a vacuum. And it's not only the political influence, it's also the cultural, ideological, social context that this selection of narratives has been taken in. I would also say that we observe that many narratives that dominate for decades or even centuries are of the sudden are changed. It seems to us out of the sudden. But in fact, we noticed that there were voices of marginalized groups, of racial, ethnical, sexual minorities, of women that have not been told or were silenced for a very long time. If we think about Central and Eastern Europe, it was already mentioned today that for decades the story could have not been debated in a free way. And only after the fall of communism, there was finally the opportunity to discuss what happened not only during communism, but also during the Second World War and before. And this process is still ongoing. And some last remarks. I see a huge difference between how history is approached in well-functioning, full-fledged democracies and in countries that are backsliding or in autocracies. I'm going to be also here a bit selective and simplify because of the time concerns, but in democracies, in theory, we have space and room for a discussion. And also those voices from below, NGOs, oral history, there is, in theory, space for it. Of course, what institutions get funding, what projects, the research projects get more funding, this can be seen as some sort of political leverage. But nevertheless, there's much more freedom and space for debate. But what we see in backsliding democracies is that those democratically selected governments, after judiciary and media, go after all the institutions that are relevant to history. And there are attempts to rewrite history textbooks. There are, new heads of those most important institutions for culture of remembrance who are being nominated not because of their expertise, or not only, but because of their political affiliations, and then or sympathies. And then, it's enough to change the management, who then sets the tone for the whole institution. And what also then follows is this very dominant master narrative, very often polarizing narrative of us against them, us, the dominant group, and them, either within the society or abroad. And the example of, a very prime example of how this can be also used is what Vladimir Putin did just before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, when he gave that very long speech with a lot of on history, as he claimed, which was very much manipulated and fabricated, to justify to the domestic, but also international audiences, why he wants to invade Ukraine. And this is not even instrumentalization of history, this is weaponization of history.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. At this point, I would open for questions from the audience, so please raise your hand if you do have a question, and please briefly introduce yourself and keep your questions even briefer. I'll hold that for you.
Okay, good. Hello, thank you so much for the panel. My name is Sophia, I'm from Germany. And as you just mentioned, Malvina, that in history, oftentimes women or underrepresented groups are just kind of getting lost in the storytelling. And I'm wondering how we as a young generation or as a society can make sure that in the history that is being written currently, we amplify those voices and make sure that such undergoing of history and stories doesn't happen again.
Wonderful, thank you. Malvina, will you take this?
Yes, of course, I'm so happy to share this question. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, I think that even the very fact that you as a young generation talk about it yourself, that you may get involved into those NGOs that are also working on similar topics, and that you engage yourself into sharing such stories, that there is even demand. I think this also puts more pressure on institutions to create either exhibitions or to publish a lot on the topic. And also to give you an example on a slightly different maybe topic, but in Poland there was a huge trend of telling the story from below of the peasants, because the history was always presented from the perspective of the elites, which are ideal and everything, blah, 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 but rarely from the perspective of peasants. And there was such an interest that then even institutions, historical institutions started, organizing much more on this topic. And then there is also a book on female peasants, and they applied. And now there is more and more interest in this topic. So I think that, if you voiced this demand, then there will be also more action following. So keep going.
Is there anything you would want to add?
Yeah, just briefly, because it was also, you already talked about the institutions. I think it's extremely important to challenge institutions on that matter, because as you just said before, there is no such thing as a neutral history, because if you present history neutrally, it means you represent the hegemonic perspective, and it's not even reproducing the actual quantities. I mean, there are much more women than men in society, but museums, especially history museums, give the impression that there are very often in certain periods there haven't even been any women. And it's really, really important to challenge institutions on that. And I think it's changing, but there's always the possibility of a backlash, and we see especially in museums in Central Europe that this can be undone extremely easily, and so it needs to be constantly fought for.
Thank you very much. Another question here. I'll hold that for you. Name and short question, please, and also who it's directed to.
My name is Günther Fellinger. I'm activist for Kosovo. Today is the 12th of June, and the 12th of June is the day of Kosovo liberation in 1999. And I see that, of course, we had a reason to intervene. We had also a very good narrative to end the genocide there, and this is one of the most important humanitarian intervention in history. But now there is, of course, a constant counterattack on our activities and on the liberation of Kosovo. My question is very clear. Why can we not defend more actively our past decision, and why are we oft so passively in defending our past record, and then we lose today's narrative again? Thank you.
Is that like a general question to everyone?
I don't know who wants to defend the case.
Okay. Thank you. Who's the Kosovo expert amongst this panel? I should have known that Günther is going to ask a question on Kosovo, of course.
I just think it's not easy to respond to this question. It's very good that you point out that backlash can also happen, and that and we have to be prepared for that. And this happens in very many contexts. But I don't know if I can offer any good advice on how exactly to tackle it, other as being very persistent. And as I said before, like keep going, but because at some point, again, in democracies, those voices will be heard.
I mean, I see in there also some sort of question how can we actually foster unity and reconciliation, and how can we overcome maybe this division. It's a very peculiar example, of course, but maybe if we open that up a bit more broadly, maybe we'll find a better answer to that.
I mean, also a little bit more general, but still, I think it connects back to this question on how to represent the European history, because one of the obstacles, I think, to relating those histories of violence more generally is that they somehow seem to contradict premises of history. Among them, two very powerful ones. One is the premise that history is always national, and the second one, that history is always, clear and, unquestioned in a way. And both, of course, prevent us from telling a transnational history, also tell the history in the making, which would be so important. And there are especially, I'm not familiar with an example from Kosovo, but there are some examples, for instance, from Bosnia or from other regions in the Balkans, where you have bottom-up museums that try to actually bridge the divide and actually try, to work in a decentralizing way on a historical narrative that is meaningful to the region. So that is one approach, and the other approach would be, to talk about responsibilities beyond the nationalist perspective. And this is often so hard to establish because it seems to contradict, the historical narrative that is always, we only talk about us until the border, but all those conflicts let's talk about the Balkans, let's talk about Ukraine. All of those conflicts are, of course, European conflicts in a way, and so they also matter to us Europeans in any sort.
I would also like to include Svetlana maybe from her personal experience, because I mean that is one thing that certainly relates to what was happening in Kosovo and what is happening right now in Ukraine. When you document this, how do you deal with the weight of documenting these challenges and documenting trauma and trying to promote understanding and reconciliation?
In Ukrainian case, actually, Putin don't understand that for 1 minute when there was the full-scale invasion started, they united all our society. Yeah? So for today, of course, we have some battles there for history, for renaming our street, place, damage some or monuments there, but our society are very open. Yeah, so we like big eyes and watch everything around, and it's helped us to be like more strong and brave inside of country. Now, of course, we are not ideal, and we have these debates and fight for everything inside, including our politics and politic of memory. For example, Babin Yar, we have a good example because we have so many conversations in so many battles for the memory from Holocaust survival to Roma national identity, and the results we dreams about some museum, so it's the results we have no museum. And the Babin Yar today extremely transforms their activity, and they follow for the criminals, Russian and Ukrainian side. So it's not on the time to think about this memorial, about the past, because we have so many problems and trauma today. But I mean that it's helped us to create like it's fuss around something wrong, or around we have some doubts as for these politics authority. So we are open to criticize that we can do it because we are living in democracy actually. So maybe our case can help you. But I don't know exactly. I'm not an expert. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, time is always too short, unfortunately. So we are approaching the end. I have one final question to the whole panel, and I would like to hear your different answers, because I think it's a very challenging question and a very important one, nevertheless, if we want to follow the beginning that we talked about, remembrance for the future. So how can societies actually move beyond the polarization that results from politicized memory? And maybe Stefan, do you want to start?
So, I mean, the short answer would be there can't be remembrance that is democratic without the more democratic means. So that seems quite obvious, but it is actually quite a different demand than what the actual situation is. So when you look at how monuments are constructed, how memorials are established, how museums are curated, it's very, very often extremely rigorously planned top-down processes that do not involve the communities they are addressing. And our example as a museum, as the House of Austrian History, shows actually that one needs not to be afraid of having more democratic processes, or even thinking of memory as more process-oriented. So one can really gain from thinking of memorials, of monuments, but also of museums as not something that needs to be, finished, achieved as a product, but rather as a process in which you involve different communities, in which people have a say, and which can more easily react to a different question, because the past is never about what has happened, but it's very often about what, you know, is the burning question now. And so, you know, we need to think of memory more process-oriented and especially as more democratic. And I think many institutions are not equipped for that right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Malvina, what's your take?
I mean, as you mentioned, the society, I think we all are the society. So actually it starts with us. And I would like to have a project where I put people on the car and, you know, put them on the way and make them discuss history and their interpretations of it. But I think if politicians let historians and historical institutions do their job, if historians do not follow the pressure from politicians, and if we as a society try to learn more about different voices, you know, go beyond this narrative that we learn only at school, which is not falsified or anything, but it's just like a part of the picture, it's not the full picture, then in a way we can maybe overcome polarization this way because we understand the perspective of the other side. And I think acceptance is also very important. Acceptance of past dark chapters, for example, the fact that we admit that something happened, that we apologize to those who were marginalized or were victims of crimes perpetrated by our groups or nations, and that we commit that it won't happen again, or that we will, you know, work on having a better future. Then I think that is also a way, because the success, the bigger success, is to not let the past or the mistakes of our ancestors to dictate how the future will be like. So we don't think in the terms like, if there was a war back in a day, then this nation is our enemy until the end of the days, but that we can overcome it. And also acceptance in this sense, and here I will also like to end up with an anecdote, that a journalist once asked me that Austria is certainly, you know, craving its old territories. And I asked, like, what do you mean? Because it used to be a huge empire, so for sure there is this nostalgia. And I said, no, not that I know, at least. But we see that there are many countries which do that, and which sometimes stretch over 9 time zones and still go after this you know, piece of land and use history to explain it. So I think this is why acceptance is so important. And I mean, Austria can serve here as I think, a good example.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can, instead of cars, do that in a train, and maybe the EU can fund some train tickets. Yeah, there we go. So I think we are going to write a project application very soon. Thank you. And famous last words of the panel, Svetlana.
Last word for this question?
For this question, yeah.
Okay, I remember this quote from the morning panel in a bay from this young girl about listening to each other, and for me it's very powerful things, and we should listen more and more, maybe with thoughtful empathy, with a big level of empathy, I think, and everything will be okay with our today's and the future. So only these things.
Thank you very much. I think these are wonderful last words. I would like to use the opportunity to amplify again what you have brought with you. I think it's very interesting. Have a look at it. It has this graphic novel approach. It's in 2 languages, which gives you the opportunity to also learn some Ukrainian, which is a beautiful language. So use the opportunity, get some copies. Thank you very much. Thank not only you, but of course the whole panel. I think this was a short but very comprehensive discussion. Thank you very much for keeping this so short and simple, because I think we put a lot of information into this. few famous last words from me. Of course, first of all, again, a big thank you also to the first part of the panel, Lukas, Mandl and Petra, Korlaar. Thank you very much for the input. Thank you very much to the Europa-Forum Wachau for the opportunity and the good cooperation. Also, again, of course, the good cooperation with the AG Donauländer and the cooperation with the University for Continuing Education. Last but not least, again, a big thank you to the IDM team. If you liked what we did, follow, of course, all of the institutions that I mentioned, but first and foremost, have a look at idm.at. We are an association. You can become a member. You can support us also one time with buying us a coffee if you like to do so, or you subscribe our newsletter, spread our mission. That also helps us very much. I'm Sebastian Schäfer. I'm the director, and it was my honor and pleasure to moderate this 5th Danube Salon. It was also my 5th time moderating the salon. It's the 3rd location that we used. We always come back a 2nd time so far, so I hope that in the future we can also come back to this wonderful location. And here, my last thank you, of course, to the Landesgalerie to provide us this beautiful space for this discussion. The last 2 years, we were on a ship. If you are sad that we were stationary here now and not on a ship cruising the Danube, I have very good news for you. The ship is waiting outside at the dock. You can join, and they will ship through the beautiful UNESCO cultural natural heritage site.
Austria and the Navy in the past.
Yeah. I think this is a very peaceful ship, though, without weapons. But in any case, please use the opportunity, do some networking. Thank you very much again, and hopefully see you next year. Thank you.